I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive overview as to how you can identify the vintage Bubble Cut Barbies. I think this identification method is the easiest structure that we can use, so let's go ahead and dive in. In my opinion, 1962 is the hardest era to identify the vintage Bubble Cut Barbies. And that is large in part to the fact that they look very similar to the 1961 era dolls, aside from two small things. Hello to all of my friends out there. This is Ian from the Nostalgic Toy Archive, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm super excited for today's video. I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive overview as to how you can identify the vintage Bubble Cut Barbies. Now, before we dive in, I do want to give you two quick disclaimers. First and foremost, I am not a professional, so please take my advice with a grain of salt. But I did do a lot of preparation for today's video, as well as consult with a number of my collector friends who have a lot more experience. The second disclaimer I want to leave you with is this, and that is that unfortunately, we do not have a detailed numbering system for identifying the Bubble Cut Barbies like we do with the vintage Ponytail Barbies. For today's video, we will cover roughly 4 variations of the Bubble Cut Barbies, and they are actually going to go in sequential order by year. Variation 1 will cover the year 1961, Variation 2 will cover the year 1962, Variation 3 will cover the year 1963, and Variation 4 will cover the years 1964 to 1966. I think this identification method is the easiest structure that we can use, so let's go ahead and dive in. So in 1961, we are introduced to the very cute Bubble Cut Barbie. And as you can see, she has a completely different hairstyle than the Ponytail Barbie. This was the second Barbie ever released in the market and the second hairstyle that Barbie ever had. Now, the vintage Ponytail Barbies were still in production. At this time in 1961, we were on the 5th variant of the vintage Ponytail Barbie, the number 5 Ponytail. There are going to be a lot of similarities between a 1961 Bubble Cut and a number 5 Ponytail Barbie. The Bubble Cut Barbies and the Ponytail Barbies from 1961 onward were always produced on the same body. And her buttocks markings will say Barbie Pats Penned. At this time, the patent was still pending for Barbie. Now, we will actually have these butt markings all the way until 1962. So both a 1961 and a 1962 Bubble Cut will have the same buttocks markings and essentially the exact same body. The key difference between a 1961 Bubble Cut and a 1962 Bubble Cut is in the facial screening and in the hairstyle. The first wave of Bubble Cuts actually had a very tight, short bouffant hairstyle, and they will have the exact same facial screening as a number 5 Ponytail Barbie. They will have those very vibrant, larger red lips. If you look at a number 5 Ponytail Barbie and look at a first edition 1961 Bubble Cut, they will pretty much have the exact same facial screening. I also want to point out that in 1961, a lot of these dolls had what was called greasy face syndrome. I have mentioned this before in the ponytail identification video. In the early beginnings of 1961, these dolls were made with a new formula, and unfortunately, there was a flaw with the formula that caused the plasticizer in the head mold to leach. And so a lot of these early 1961 Bubble Cuts and a lot of the early 1961 number 5 Ponytail Barbies will have a fairly greasy complexion. This is not the case with all of the dolls, but from my experience in collecting, the vast majority do have the greasy face. It was also only in 1961 that the Bubble Cut Barbie was manufactured and sold with the classic zebra stripe swimsuit. Another side note for the 1961 Bubble Cut is that the artwork had not yet been changed on the boxes, so these dolls were actually manufactured and sold with the older boxes that still had the illustrations and artwork of the Ponytail Barbie. In my opinion, the best way to identify these 1961 era dolls is in the haircut. If the hair is a lot shorter and a lot tighter and not as fluffy as some of the other Bubble Cut Barbies, that is a pretty good indication that she is a first edition Bubble Cut Barbie. Also look for the greasy face. They're not always going to have a greasy face, but quite a few of them will. And then also be sure to check the body markings. If she is on a Barbie only Pat's pinned body, then all of those signs will probably clearly indicate that she is a first wave, first edition. Since these are the first versions released, they do typically tend to be a little bit more pricey in the secondhand market. I think they're very cute. Mine is not in the greatest shape. She came from Florida. She was in a very humid environment and her head, unfortunately, is not staying in place. It's not very stable, and I think that has a lot to do with the storage and the environment that she was stored in. I still think she's very cute. She is my only first edition. Before we dive into 1962, I do want to talk briefly about the Brownette Bubble Cut as well as the White Ginger Bubble Cut Barbie. These were also produced in 1961. They are also technically first wave or first era bubble cuts, and they happen to be a lot harder to find. The Brownette Bubble Cut Barbie had a very light chestnut brown hair color. This was a hair color that was produced for a very short period of time. I believe that this was to coincide with the 1961 Brownette Ken doll that we had. Ken was also released in 1961, the same year as the Bubble Cut Barbie, and he had a very rare Brownette hair color, as did Barbie, but they were only in the market for a very short period of time. We really don't know if this was sort of a fluke or if Mattel was sort of testing out a new hair color, but regardless, those dolls were only produced in that year. The easiest way to identify this doll is in the coloring of the hair. She's going to have all of the same attributes as the 1961 Bubble Cut. The only difference is going to be that she is going to have that really pretty light chestnut coloring. She's very expensive on the secondhand market and a very hard to find doll. The White Ginger Barbie is also very rare. She's also going to have the same attributes as the 1961 era Bubble Cut. The only difference with her is the hair color, and she is going to be the only exception with the lip color as well. Instead of having those vibrant red lips, she actually has pink lips. It is important to note that the White Ginger was only produced in 1961, so aside from the pink lips and the ginger hair color, she's going to have the same attributes as the 1961 era dolls. So now we're going to go ahead and mosey on over to 1962, and in my opinion, 1962 is the hardest era to identify the vintage Bubble Cut Barbies. And that is large in part to the fact that they look very similar to the 1961 era dolls, aside from two small things. In this year, the hair starts to get a lot more fluffy. So looking at her and comparing her to my 1961 era doll, it is apparent that the hairstyle is a little bit more of a true bouffant. It's a lot puffier, and this is the era where we do start to see some small variations in lip colors. Her lips are not the deep red, they're actually a coral color. But aside from the lip color and the fluffier hairstyle, she really does look a lot like the 1961 era doll. This is also the year that Barbie is put into the red Helenca swimsuit. So these dolls would not be on the zebra print swimsuits. They would actually come in those classic red Helenca swimsuits instead. This is a really challenging time for identifying bubble cuts. I think some people just kind of keep 1961 and 1962 into the same bundle, but in all fairness, the 1961 doll is the first wave edition. By 1962, with the introduction of the red swimsuit and the different lip colors, in my opinion, we do start to see enough of a variation to really point that out as a separate phase. I really love this bubble cut. She is one of my favorites, and she is modeling a favorite outfit of mine, which is called Theater Date. So in 1963, Mattel introduces us to Midge, Barbie's best friend. Midge and Barbie share the exact same body. This was completely done on purpose. Mattel wanted the clothing to be interchangeable between Barbie and Midge. They share the exact same wardrobe, and they also share the exact same body. But with her release, her name was trademarked, so it was also added to the buttocks markings in 1963. So in 1963, we do have different buttocks markings that will help us to identify the vintage bubble cut Barbie. It's also in this year that the neck knob is changed. We no longer have the small neck knob. We have a much larger neck knob, and this helped the face to be a lot more stable on the doll. It makes it a lot harder to take the head off of the doll. So just as a side note, on the larger neck knob dolls, you want to be really careful removing the head. You almost always want to warm the head up in warm water if you're ever going to remove it, because the large neck knobs are notorious for creating neck splits. This is a really beautiful example of a 1963 era Barbie. Now, she looks very similar to the 1962 era doll that I showed you previously, but this one does have the different buttocks markings because she came out the same year that Midge did, and she also has a little bit of a wider face due to that larger neck knob. It's not until we hit 1963 that we do start to see some varying shades of hair colors, especially with the blondes. I don't have any examples of different shades of blonde on my 1963 era dolls because I only have two, a blonde and a Titian, but by the time we dive into 1964, which we will shortly, you will see some varying hair colors. But I just want to make it clear that pretty much in 1961 and 1962, we only had those standard classic hair colors that we also had on the vintage ponytail Barbies at that time. This is my other 1963 era Bubble Cut Barbie. She's a Titian, but she is wearing the very glamorous outfit, Sophisticated Lady. It's also at this time that the bouffant hair starts to get a lot fluffier or poofier, however you want to say it, on these Bubble Cut Barbies. All right, so now we are going to dive into the last era of the Bubble Cut Barbie. This is the 1964 era, or the 1964 phase. I've already forgotten if I'm calling them phases or eras, but you catch my drift. In my opinion, 1964 through 1966 is where we get the widest variation of the bubble cuts. But that aside, the key identifier we do have now is the word patented on the right buttocks of the doll. If the doll's buttocks has the Midge Barbie marking with the word patented, then that is a clear sign that she came out as early as 1964 and as late as about 1966. The buttocks markings are always the best way to identify these dolls with this type of system that I am using, but the other thing that I want to mention that is a key variation in these 1964 and later era bubble cuts is that the face mold actually changes as well. She is now using the same facial sculpt as the Swirl Ponytail and American Girl Barbies. This facial sculpt gives Barbie a lot fuller face. She has chubbier cheeks, and her lip stenciling is also a little different from the earlier era dolls. As I've mentioned, this is just an era where there are a lot more variations in the bubble cuts. I really love this era of the bubble cut Barbie. It also, coincides with the eras of the swirl ponytail and the American Girl Barbie. I just really like this facial sculpt. I really prefer the chubbier cheeks on the bubble cuts. I don't know why that is. It just looks cuter maybe with their hairstyles. But yeah, I have taken a bit of creative liberty with these gals, and the hoop earrings are not original. By this point in time, we only had pearl earrings on these dolls, so I've been taking some creative liberties with these ones, but they're very cherished in my collection. In 1966, we are introduced to the Color Magic Barbie. And it's during this era that a lot more vibrant color is used in the color palette of the facial screenings of Barbie. The Color Magic dolls in particular have very vibrant blush, very deep red coloring in their lips, and the eyeliner is a little bit of a lighter shade of blue, and it's a lot fuller and just a lot more vibrant. Also in 1965, the straight leg Barbie body is essentially retired in many ways in favor of the bend leg Barbie. So there are some variations of the bubble cuts during this era that are produced on the bendable leg Barbie bodies. I do not happen to have any of those dolls, and it is my understanding that they were a little bit more popular in the European market. It's a lot harder to find a bubble cut Barbie on a bendable leg body. This doll is actually a one-of-a-kind creation. I did give her that high color profile just as an example, but she is not an original high color profile. She was just a standard 1964 or later issue that originally had the coral colored lips, but I just wanted to take some creative liberty with her, and I think she is a good example of that color magic profile that you could still look for on the bendable leg Barbie bodies. Around the bendable leg era, we are also introduced to the side part bubble cut Barbie. This doll is pretty much identical to any bubble cut, except the majority of them at this point in time are produced either on the bendable leg Barbie bodies or they are on the standard straight leg Barbie bodies, but they are actually sold in the European market only, and they were actually sold with the Fashion Queen swimsuits. The headpiece wasn't used, but the swimsuit was actually used for their bathing suit that they were sold in. The side part bubble cuts are often referred to as a European exclusive. I don't know if they were necessarily only available in Europe, but that seems to be where they were marketed and sold far more than in America. I have heard from many collectors abroad that a lot of their bubble cuts tend to be side parts, which I find very interesting because here in the American market, they are quite rare. I think that just about wraps up today's video. That's all I have for you regarding information on identifying the vintage bubble cut Barbies. These are really special dolls. They are typically a lot easier to find in the secondhand market. And at the time of this recording, prices have definitely gone up for the bubble cuts, but I do find that they are, generally speaking, a lot more affordable than the vintage ponytail era Barbies. I hope that you found this video helpful today. Let me know in the comments below if you are now able to identify roughly what era your bubble cut is from. I would love to know. And thanks again for watching, and definitely consider subscribing for more vintage Barbie content. My name is Ian, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.